This is a story about a cabin in the wilderness, miles and miles from where there's any electricity or natural gas lines. And yet there's a water heater in that cabin. It's
What?
in Colorado. And we're going to take a look at the general area so we can get a sense of how far it is away from anything else and what it takes to get there. Because you're either going to walk or you're going to ride a horse. So here we are. Let's zoom into the Flat Tops Wilderness area and take a look at where it is and then what it takes to get to the cabin. And then we've got some old 16 millimeter film that's been converted to digital so we can take a look at how it gets from the trailhead to the cabin and what happens in between. In 1932, the U.S. Forest Service created what was called the Flat Tops Primitive Area. It's about 118,000 acres. It wasn't until about 40 years later that Congress enacted the legislation creating the Flat Tops Wilderness, doubling that amount of acreage to almost 238,000 miles, as you'll see by the red markings on this map. At the time of the legislation, there was already, and had been for 40 or 50 years, private land in that area that is now surrounded by what is a declared National Wilderness Area. And in that is a cabin that we call the La Solar Lodge, kind of an in-family joke. In that lodge, we have slept as many as 30 people over time. It obviously has changed over the years. The roof has been changed a number of times and now has a nice metal roof on it. We've had as many as 30 people in that back area in the loft space that you can see here, as well as in the bedrooms, quote unquote, at the bottom there by the fireplace. The front is a kind of common area, kitchen, dining room, card playing area. See the wood stove in the corner, but then there's a more modern kitchen sink with hot and cold running water. And then on the other side of the kitchen sink is a fridge just there to keep the mice from getting into various foodstuffs. And then you can see on the other corner of the cabin of the kitchen, the common area, fishing supplies and binoculars and tools. Old kerosene lamps have been replaced with butane lamps or with copper piping running to the butane tanks that are outside. So how do you get to the cabin? Well, probably walk. That's the easiest way. It's 5 miles. It can be a little steep. At one time, it'll get above 8,500 feet, maybe a little higher. But it's a pretty decent trail up to the cabin, as you can see here. Of course, you could also ride a horse. That's probably the fastest way to get up there. May not always be the most comfortable way, but it is a whole lot more pleasant than walking the 5 miles unless you're planning to fish. And then, of course, you arrive at the cabin and you're ready to have some fun. So these are going up the trail back in the 1970s. And of course, when you arrive at the cabin, you got to play in the mud a little bit, play in the creek that sits out in front of the house. I guarantee you, you're going to get dirty. And that's why a hot water heater made its way to the cabin. So just how do you get the fridge that my granddad took up or the water heater up to the cabin? Well, you could do it the way Granddad did, tandem style, which is what Aunt Rachel and Uncle Buck are trying to do here. So here we are in the early 70s. They're getting Shiner in front and Smokey in the back. And Smokey's not liking this at all. He really doesn't like this at all. He is going to go crazy here in a minute. And and as they get ready to lead out, you can see that Smokey is really acting up. He eventually takes off, wraps it around a tree, and then down over a bank he goes, and we lose the water heater down on the ground. My Uncle Buck and the friends pick it up and carry it back up into the campground, do a little inspection, and decide that probably they ought to haul it back into town, which they have just done. The water heater was declared okay, and now they're going to put it on Shiner. So this is now the successful attempt. So we're going to lead Shiner, one horse, I don't know how they offset the balance of the water heater, but you can see it headed up the trail, and there it goes all the way up to the cabin. As you can see here, the cabin sits lower than the hill up above it, and that's important because there's a spring from the Soldier Creek that is providing water to the cabin through an underground pipeline. There's hot and cold running water at a cabin miles from anywhere else. Now, if you look close, you can see there's some butane tanks out there. I've made a few trips down the trail with my Aunt Rachel to the nearest store and get a couple of tanks refilled and then back up to the cabin. Now that, by the way, is about a 4 or 5 hour adventure. It's quite an adventure. It's I thought it was a story that you might enjoy. Thanks for watching. Of course, I'd appreciate to hear your comments, maybe a few chuckles, your thoughts, or maybe you've done something similar. So just leave your comments down below, maybe hit the like button. And as always, I really appreciate your time watching. Thank you very much.